Hello everyone and welcome again in today's very informative video. My name is Dr. Charu Datta and today I'll be talking about the electoral bond scheme and the electoral trust scheme. Okay. So if you have been following the newspapers recently, you must have read about these two particular topics. So recently what has happened, the Supreme Court of India has reserved its judgment which were challenging the concept of electoral bond scheme. Now this electoral bond scheme was introduced by the NDA government, by the current government in year 2018. Actually the concept of the electoral bond scheme was first given in the budget of 2017 and then the scheme was initiated from 2018 onwards, right? So as you all know that this particular year is the election year for most of the states like Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, also Mizoram, Telangana. They are going to have the elections of the state assembly this year, right? In this month, in this very particular month. And next year in the month of May 2024, we are going to have Lok Sabha elections as well. So you know that election is, is going to be held in the recent scenario. So the concept of electoral bond here is very much highlighted. So we need to understand what is this electoral bond scheme and why the electoral trust scheme is also being discussed. Now you need to understand electoral bond scheme was introduced by the NDA government, that is the current government, BJP government, in year 2018. Whereas electoral trust scheme was introduced by UPA government, that is, dominated by Congress in year 2013. So, dono hi schemes mein there is little bit of difference, and we need to understand what are the basic, similarities and dissimilarities in these two schemes. So the questions, why the questions are being raised on this particular electoral bond scheme, right? So let me first start by discussing what are electoral bonds. Okay. Now, as you may have the some idea about the bond. Now, when I say word bond, a bond is like a promissory note. If let me give you an example. Let's say if I want to buy a bond from any financial institution, from a bank, that is a bank, right? So I'll just go and whatever amount I have in my account, so whatever amount of bond I wish to buy from that particular bank, I'll inform the bank that kindly give me a bond, issue me a bond of this particular denomination or this particular amount. Okay. So same concept is applied for purchasing a electoral bond as well. Electoral bond is a way, is a technique, or you can say it is a method by which any individual or any organization or any company, they can make contributions to the political parties. As I've given you an example that most of the states are going to have the elections this year, this particular month. So they need funding to conduct elections, right? Political parties, they need huge amount of money, they need fundings for election campaigns, for rallies, so whatever agenda they are going to organize, so they need a lot of funding. And this funding comes mainly from donations which they receive from either individual or different political parties. Okay? तो 2018 में जो NDA government ने this concept which they have introduced, which is electoral bond, यही वो तरीका है जिससे आज के तारीख में political parties they can receive huge amount of donation. Now before this scheme of electoral bond was introduced, so whatever donations were made which were higher in denomination than 20,000 rupees, the political parties, they were required to inform about that kind of contribution to the Election Commission of India, right? यदि उन्हें 20,000 रुपए से ज़्यादा का donation मिलता था, they have to give the complete detail, the depositors' detail to the Election Commission of India. But when the concept of electoral bond was introduced, this donation has become very anonymous. And this is the very reason why this concept has been challenged in the Supreme Court. So again, I'm going to tell you the definition, what is electoral bond. It is like a promissory note which can be bought by any Indian citizen or any company which is incorporated in India from selected branches of State Bank of India. So an individual or a company, if they wish to make any kind of donation to any political party of their choice, they can simply go to the designated branches of the State Bank of India and they can purchase those electoral bonds. Okay. The citizen or corporate can then donate the same bond to any eligible political party of their choice. So once they get the bond from that particular branch of SBI, they can now donate it to the political party. So I've just explained you, if I'm an individual and I want to make donation to my favorite political party, I'll simply go to the designated branch of the SBI, which has been, mentioned by the Election Commission of India. These are the registered branches. From that branch only, I can purchase electoral bond. How will I do that? I'll go to the bank. Whatever amount I wish to donate, utne particular denomination ka, usi value ka electoral bond I will purchase. Now, as soon as I purchase the electoral bond, nothing will be mentioned on that promissory note on that electoral bond. That means my details are not going to be mentioned anywhere that I have purchased that bond. Simply एक मुझे कागज दिया जाएगा, उसके ऊपर उसका value, उसका denomination लिखा होगा. Let's say I have purchased electoral bond of 1 lakh rupees. So only 1 lakh rupees will be written over that bond. Now that bond I can donate in the account of my favorite political party. So that is a method by which any organization or entity can donate to the political party of the choice. The bonds are similar to bank notes which are payable to the bearer on demand and are free of interest. Once I purchase the bond, I am not going to pay any interest on it. An individual or party will be allowed to purchase the bonds digitally or through check also. Now, as I've told you, it is just like a promissory note or just like a bond which we buy from the bank. Now, these electoral bonds have one speciality. What is that? That they are sold in multiples of 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, 1 crore and so on. So they are always issued in these multiples only. They can be purchased through KYC compliant account. What is KYC? KYC का full form होता है Know Your Customer. Once the customer's account is verified, once my details are verified, from that account only I can purchase electoral bond and I can make donation to the political parties. Now these parties, once the political party receive the donations in the form of electoral bonds, they have only 15 days to encash that electoral bond. It can be a donation by an individual, it can be donation by any company, by an entity, by an organization, by any trust. So they have only 15 days. That means what is the shelf life of the electoral bond? So you need to understand the shelf life of the electoral bond is only for 15 days. Once the donation or the contribution is made in the account of the political party, within 15 days they have to encash it. The name and other information of the donor are not entered in the instrument. This is the very concept of electoral bond. The donations are anonymous, right? Political parties will never know from where the donations are coming. That means who has made the donation. The name of the donor is not mentioned anywhere in the bond. That is the anonymous type of donation. There is no cap. Now there is no limit. There is no upper limit on the number of electoral bonds one can purchase. So you can purchase as many electoral bonds as you want and you can donate it to your favorite political party for their election campaigns. The government brought in amendments to 4 articles to introduce the concept of electoral bonds. So as I've told you, when the NDA government introduced the concept of electoral bond, they had to make 4 types of amendments in 4 acts. One was the People's Act of 1951, that is Representation of People's Act of 1951. Second was Companies Act of 2013, Income Tax Act of 1961 and Foreign Contributions Regulation Act of 2010. So any foreign company which is not settled in India, which is somewhere outside India, they can also make contributions to the political party by the same method. So these 4 acts were amended by the government, by NDA government, when they introduced the concept of electoral bond scheme. Now, who can receive funding via electoral bond? Let us talk about the political parties over here. The political parties which have secured at least 1% of votes which were polled in the recent Lok Sabha elections or the state assembly elections, right? Only such parties which have received at least 1% of the total votes, only these parties are eligible to receive the donation. Also, these parties must have the verified account from Election Commission of India. हर एक पॉलिटिकल पार्टी का एक वेरीफाइड अकाउंट होगा which is verified by the Election Commission of India. Only in that particular amount, only in that particular account they are going to receive these contributions or donations in the form of electoral bonds. The bond amounts are deposited in the account within 15 days of their purchase. As I've told you, they have to encash in 15 days. The amount received as donation gets deposited into Prime Minister's Relief Fund. Okay, so whatever amount the political party has received, it will be ultimately going where? It will be going in the Prime Minister's Relief Fund. नाउ ऐसा नहीं है कि जब आपका मन चाहे तब आप इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स जाके एसबीआई की ब्रांचेस से खरीद सकते हैं. नहीं, देयर इज अ विंडो ओपन फॉर परचेजिंग ऑफ द इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स एंड इट इज अवेलेबल ओनली फॉर द पीरियड ऑफ 10 days. कब 10 days in January, 10 days in April, 10 days in July and 10 days in October. And also for Lok Sabha elections, they are open for 30 days. So when you talk about the state assembly elections, you will get a window of 10 days whenever you want to make the contribution in these 4 particular months. And when you talk about the Lok Sabha elections, you will get 30 days to purchase those electoral bonds from the defined or the designated SBI branches only. Okay. So this is the system of electoral bond. Now, lot many questions were raised on the transparency, which is connected with the concept of electoral bond scheme. A lot many questions, allegations were made against the government which is in power, that they are misusing their power through the electoral bond scheme. We will understand how. See, there are a lot of questions. First of all, the basic concept is SBI, State Bank of India, is obviously will be under the control of the government which is going to be in the power. So in this case, if BJP is in the power in the center, obviously they can anytime know who was behind that particular donation. It is just for the namesake only, the anonymity which you mention over here, that the government, the political party would never know who has made this particular contribution. But ultimately, SBI comes under central government only. So they can anytime know the person who has made this particular contribution or donation in the form of electoral bond. So opposition parties are having concern over this, that let's say if any individual has made a contribution to an opposition party, the government which is in power would definitely know that from which organization or which entity the donation is coming to their opposition party. So they may create problem for those kind of donors. So this is one main concern of the opposition party. The concept of anonymity is not wholly or not, it's not completely anonymous. This is the major concern. Now again, if you have read recent articles, you must be reading about the electoral trust scheme also. The electoral bond, to have just explained you, it is just like a bond which you buy from the bank, and through that bond you can make contribution to your favorite political party. But in 2013, UPA government, United Progressive Alliance, that is Congress government, they have introduced this particular scheme, the electoral trust scheme. Now let us understand what is a trust. Now trust can be understood as a company, as an organization or entity, right? So it is a trust which is established by the companies with the primary purpose of distributing contributions which they receive from other companies and individuals to political party. तो इनका मतलब था कि एक ट्रस्ट बनाया जाएगा, एक बॉडी या असेंबली बनाई जाएगी, and this trust, it will have the sole purpose of receiving contributions from either individuals or companies or entity. Then this trust is going to make donation to the political party, right? Now यहाँ इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड स्कीम में हमने क्या देखा कि whosoever want to make a contribution, they will have to buy the electoral bond themselves. But in electoral trust scheme, a dedicated trust will be made, and this trust will have the major task of receiving the funds from entities or organization, and then they will make contributions to the political party. Only companies which are registered under Section 25 of the Companies Act of 1956 were eligible to apply for approval as electoral trust. Such trusts were called as electoral trust. The trust which were mandated to receive the contributions and then to make donations to the political parties were named as electoral trust. And who can form such electoral trust? Only the companies which were registered under the Companies Act of 1956. The electoral trust must apply for renewal every 3 financial years. Now, provisions which are related to electoral trust, which were governed by the Income Tax Act of 1961 and Income Tax Rule of 1962. So, whatever protocols, whatever steps any electoral trust need to follow, they were mentioned where? They were mentioned in these particular acts, Income Tax Act of 1961. Now, the trust can receive contribution from Indian citizen, from registered Indian companies which are registered under the Companies Act of 1956, from any firm or Hindu undivided families or resident associations, those who reside in India. They are prohibited from accepting contributions. Who cannot make a contribution through electoral trust? Non-Indian citizen, foreign entities और other registered electoral trust. तो यहाँ पे बताया गया है कि कौन कौन electoral trust को donations दे सकता था for contributing to the political party and who were not eligible. So basically foreign entities या foreign citizens, foreign individuals, they were not given the permission. Now distribution mechanism, if we look at the distribution mechanism of electoral trust scheme, for administrative expenses, उस trust को operate करने के लिए, for that electoral trust to operate, to function, they can just use only 5% of the total donations which have been made, and rest of the 95% of the donations which they have received from different entities or organizations or individuals, they have to definitely donate it to the political party. तो electoral trust अपनी functioning के लिए केवल 5% of the total donation use कर सकता था and 95% they have to donate, and this was mandated under the Representation of the People's Act. The electoral trusts are mandated to maintain detailed books of account. Now this is very, very important, this particular point. The electoral trust, how they were different from the electoral bond. I've told you electoral bond basically functions on the very principle of anonymity, right? लेकिन electoral trust को एक पूरा detailed register maintain करना पड़ता था where they have to maintain the details of the accounts, individuals, including information on the receipts, distributions and list of donors and receivers. They have to maintain all the details. So there was complete transparency in the electoral trust scheme, right? So here in this particular chart, we can understand the basic differences between the two schemes, how the electoral bond scheme functions and what was electoral trust scheme. So trust scheme, first point, basically electoral trust scheme, it operates with transparency because it used to disclose both the contributors and the beneficiaries, right? कौन donation दे रहा है, कितना डोनेशन दे रहा है और किस पॉलिटिकल पार्टी को डोनेशन दे रहा है. दिस वाज highlighted over here. It adheres to the robust reporting system because they have to maintain a register of every detail, as I've told you, and they have to submit it to the Election Commission of India. And if you will see the contributions which were made between years 2013-14 till year 22 by this electoral trust scheme, it was somewhere around 1,631 crore rupees. But on the other hand, let us talk about the electoral bond scheme. So as I've told you, they do not have complete transparency. The electoral bond scheme do not have complete transparency. It lacks transparency because of the anonymity of the donor, which makes it challenging to trace the origin of the contribution because you never know who has made the contribution, except, as I've told you one point, except for the party which is in power, they can always, ask SBI to show who has made what kind of contribution to which political party. Obviously, that's a question. It introduced a significant lack of transparency given the anonymous nature of donors, and rupees 9,208 crores, somewhere around this amount, was contributed in the same period, right? So, बहुत ज़्यादा contributions आते हैं through electoral bond scheme, and that is the reason, because of the questions of the transparency, this particular concept of electoral bond scheme was challenged in the Supreme Court. But recently, Supreme Court has reserved its judgment. That means they are going to upheld with the concept of the electoral bond scheme. However, this particular issue is still under discussion. Whatever the challenges are associated with the electoral bond scheme, the court is still discussing it, right? So this was a very brief concept of electoral bond scheme and electoral trust scheme. I hope you got the points, and I hope the concept is clear to you all. Still, if you have any other query or any other, any question, you can always mention in the comment box. Now, I'll be uploading more such videos, more such informative videos, which will help the CLAT aspirants, right? So, thank you so much. Have a nice day.